Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou. And guess what? I'm live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it also. And two, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. And sometimes they're even watchable. I don't know about this one. You can let me know down below. 2022 college football team schedule previews. I do a whole series of these videos every single offseason. We're starting it up again now for the 2022 season. I did Georgia yesterday. That was the first one I did. Up today, the Florida Gators. Shout out to Celine Driver over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. He suggested I do the Florida Gators, so we're going to do it today. If you're a member over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page, make sure you head over there, check out that post I made, and comment the team that you want to see me do the preview for. I'm going to get all my teams from the Patreon page. Once I work my way through all the suggestions over on the Patreon page, then I'll come to YouTube and I'll get suggestions from the comment section on these videos. So if you're watching this video, let me know down below some other teams that you'd like to see me do. But up today, the Florida Gators, let's get started. Here's the Florida Gators 2022 schedule. Now, these are not prediction videos. I do a whole series of prediction videos a little bit later in the offseason. I usually start those around the beginning of June. In these videos, I just like to take a look at the schedule, look at the non-con games compared to maybe last year's non-con schedule. And then with the conference schedule, which games are at home, which ones are on the road, is there a tough 2 or 3 stretch of games, is there a potential trap game somewhere, that kind of things. Just try to get a feel for some of these teams' schedules heading into 2022. Up first for the Florida Gators, they got the spring game coming up on April 14th. Not going to talk too much about that here. Spring games are what they are. I love spring games, but not a whole lot to talk about in this video with those. Now, their first regular season game of the year in 2022 is a big one. They host Utah. Utah won the Pac-12 last year, beating Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. Beat them in the regular season as well. Beat them handily both times. Utah is always one of the best coached teams around. They don't have the most talent, but they get the most out of the talent they have. This is an interesting matchup here. They have to come to Florida. Florida return favor traveling out there. Is it next year? I don't remember if it's next year or the year after. Florida's traveling out to Utah. When they do, that will be Florida's first non-con Power 5 game, road game outside the state of Florida since like 1990 when they lost on the road at Syracuse. But this one is at home for Florida. This is an interesting matchup. Anytime you get two, high-profile teams, and I don't know how high-profile nationally Utah is, but they're a really good team. I mean, they finished in the top 10, I believe, didn't they? Almost beat Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. They did win the Pac-12. Florida struggled last year. Of course, fired Dan Mullen at the end of the year, but still, Florida and Utah, two pretty big-name programs, two teams that you don't get a chance to see play very often, if at all. They kick things off to start 2022, Saturday, September 3rd, Florida hosting Utah. This is not this is a hard one to pick. I don't think anybody would be surprised if Utah went down to Florida and won the game. With that being said, it's hard to pick against the home team in a game like this. I don't know. We don't really know that much about Florida heading into this coming season because they do have the brand new coaching staff with Billy Napier. We still don't really know who the quarterback is going to be for Florida. They got Anthony Richardson returning, Emory Jones transferred out, and then they brought a transfer in from Ohio State, Jack Miller. Now, Anthony Richardson played a lot last year and did not look good. His stats were actually worse than Emory Jones. He had a lower completion percentage. His touchdown to interception ratio was horrendous. I think he had 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, something like that. Jack Miller, transfer from Ohio State, really hasn't played. I think he's got 14 pass attempts total in his 2 years at Ohio State as a backup behind Justin Fields a couple of years ago, and, of course, C.J. Stroud this past season. But this is an interesting game and one I'm looking forward to watching. Week 2 for Florida, they kick things off in the SEC with a home game against Kentucky, and this has been a great game the last 5, 6, 7 years. Not every year, but the majority of the years, the last 5 or 6 years, this Florida-Kentucky game has been really, really good. Of course, Kentucky has managed to beat them a couple of times during that time period. And there's a couple other times where Kentucky probably should have won the game and blew it at the end. The days of Florida just marking Kentucky off automatically as a win appear to be over, at least in the short term. Florida beat Kentucky, 31, 32 years in a row until a few years ago when Kentucky finally beat them. And like I said, they beat them a couple of times. So this is an interesting game, an SEC game. Both teams want to get off to a good start in the SEC East. And this is an early Week 2 game to kind of see where these two teams are at. Week 3, Florida has another non-con game, this time an in-state match up against USF, South Florida, the Bulls. It's a home game for Florida. This is one that Florida should win. South Florida had some pretty good teams several years back, but the last couple of years they've been very disappointing. They just haven't been very good. I would expect Florida to be a significant favorite in that game. And then I think probably the game of the year for both of these two teams, Florida at Tennessee at the end of September. Tennessee needs this win desperately. I mean, Tennessee needs this win in a bad, bad way. Tennessee's three biggest rivals are what? Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. They play them every year. Tennessee is something like 3-27 in the last 30 games against those three teams. One of those wins was against Florida, but they've only beat Florida like once in the last, 18, 19 years, something like that. Tennessee needs this win bad. Florida's got to go on the road. I think Florida needs this win too for Billy Napier. Florida has dominated Tennessee so much. Even in Florida's down years, they've always found a way, it seems like, at least the last 20 years, to beat Tennessee. If Napier shows up year one and loses to Tennessee, that's not going to make the fans very happy. Now, I don't think it's like a make-or-break game for Billy Napier or anything like that, but I do think this is a huge game for both of these teams early in the year at Tennessee. I would not be surprised if Tennessee is a small favorite in that game. Then you have another non-con game, this time against Eastern Washington. That should be a fairly easy win there. Of course, we thought that last year when you played Samford and they put up 100 points and 1,000 yards on you in the first half. You did find a way to win the game, though. Then you host Missouri. Missouri, I'm not expecting too much from them this year. They have played Florida and even beat Florida, or played Florida close and even beat them a couple of times over the last several years. But I would expect, Florida is the better team, in my opinion. We'll see what Missouri ends up doing at the quarterback position. There's some rumors that they may be going after JT Daniels or maybe even Emory Jones, something like that. While I think either of the, JT Daniels definitely would be an upgrade over their current quarterback situation. I'm not really sure how much it matters who Missouri gets at quarterback. I'm just not sold on them as a team. I think they need help in a lot of areas on both sides of the ball. This is a game that Florida's going to have to find a way to win, you would think. And then they host LSU, and this is an interesting game too. Florida and LSU play every single year. They're the cross-division opponents that play every single year. Florida's had a hard time beating LSU in recent years. This is Brian Kelly's first year as head coach of LSU. He's got to make the trip to Gainesville. I think LSU is a more talented team than Florida. I think they've got better athletes and playmakers at the key positions, and I think they're better defensively for sure. The question I have about this game really relates to LSU, and the question I have about them just in general for this season. How is Brian Kelly going to transition into an SEC schedule? It's not anything like he's seen before at Notre Dame or anywhere else. At Notre Dame, maybe you get up for 2 or 3 big games a year. When you're in the SEC West, almost every single week is a big game, and this one's a big game too. It'll be interesting to see. Now, this comes about dead in the middle of the season, so we'll know a lot more about Brian Kelly's LSU team when they play the game than we know right now. But this is one I'm looking forward to seeing, and one that almost is always a really good game. And then Florida gets their bye week. I think the bye week comes at a pretty good time, having it just about in the middle of the season. Like I said, you play half your season, you get a week to rest, get some players back from injury, things like that. And then you go on about your business the second half of the season. Of course, it also comes the week before the Georgia game, the annual cocktail party in Jacksonville, played every year, neutral field down there between Georgia and Florida. One of the biggest rivalries in the SEC, probably only behind Alabama and Auburn. Georgia has had Florida's number the last 6 or 7 years. I think Florida's only beat them, once in the last 7 years. Georgia won 3 in a row, lost 1. Whatever it is, Georgia, of course, humiliated them last year, really the beginning of the end for Dan Mullen in that game. This is a big game every single year. Whether Georgia is good or bad and whether Florida is good or bad is almost irrelevant. This is a great game every single year, one of the best atmospheres in all of college football. Crowd split right down the middle. Georgia, 50% of the tickets. Florida, 50% of the tickets. I've seen a lot of really good Georgia teams go into Jacksonville and lose to inferior Florida teams. I've seen some good Florida teams come into Jacksonville and lose to inferior Georgia teams. Almost always a really good game, and one that not just myself, but a lot of college football fans across the country look forward to watching every single year. This year played on October 29th, always a 3:30 game on CBS, at least for a couple more years until The SEC is leaving CBS, but so for another couple of years, 3:30 on CBS. Then they play at Texas A&M, and man, this is look. Texas A&M, they catch a lot of heat. I give them some grief too. I know they seem to find a way to lose 4 games a year, no matter what. I know they had a great recruiting class this past year, one of the best we've ever seen. Not sure how much that's going to help them this year, but I do think Texas A&M is still a really good team. And whatever you think about Jimbo Fisher, and I'm not his biggest fan either, there ain't very many coaches coaching college football who have won a national title. I mean, who are they? Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney. I'm leaving somebody out. Who am I leaving out? I'm leaving somebody out. But Mac Brown at North Carolina. There ain't very many national title winning head coaches. So the guy knows what he's doing, at least to a certain degree. And at Texas A&M is a very difficult place to play. And Florida's got to go there the week after the big rivalry game against Georgia. I think it's going to be hard for almost anybody to pick Florida in this game, to be honest. Partly because it's Texas A&M, and partly because of where it falls on the schedule right after one of the biggest games of the year for Florida every single year, that Florida-Georgia game. 2 years ago, Florida played at Texas A&M during the shortened COVID year. That was Florida's only regular season loss, I believe. Wasn't it? Well, no, it ended up losing later to LSU. At the time, that was their first loss of the season on the road at Texas A&M. And, of course, that's the game that Dan Mullen infamously, during the post-game press conference, blamed the Texas A&M crowd for the loss, a crowd of 25,000 people. Whereas when he goes out there and plays them this year, in November of 2022, there's going to be 100,000 people there. Dan Mullen's not at Florida. I mean, when Florida goes out there this year, there'll be 100,000 people there this year. But it's an interesting game. The two teams that you don't get to see play very often because they're in the different divisions. One I'm looking forward to watching. Then they come back home and they take on South Carolina. I think this is a pretty big game. I think, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky. Who's the second best team in the East? Not that those teams couldn't win the East. Of course they could. This is the offseason. Literally anybody could win anything. Georgia's going to be picked to win the East, right? I think that's pretty clear cut. Who they pick second in the East, though, I don't think nearly as clear cut. I could see some of the media going with Tennessee. I could see some of the media going with South Carolina, some going with Kentucky, maybe some going with Florida, although I doubt it. If Florida does want to compete in the East, finish second, even, something like that, this is a game they're going to have to win. This South Carolina game, the Kentucky game, the Tennessee game, 3 critical games for Florida this year to determine the pecking order in the SEC East, year 1 for Billy Napier. Florida gets South Carolina at home. Look, this is a tough 3 stretch of games here. You get really 4, right? You have LSU, then you get a bye week, then Georgia, Texas A&M, and South Carolina. Now, the good news is in that 4 stretch of games, only 1 is a real road game, and that's at Texas A&M. LSU and South Carolina are at home, and Georgia is at a neutral site. But that's a tough 4 stretch of games right there. LSU, Georgia, Texas A&M, and South Carolina. That's the bad news. The good news is after those 4 games, you get to take a vacation and play at Vandy. Should be an easy win for Florida there. And then you finish things off with your in-state rival like you do every single year on the road at Florida State. Again, not a make-or-break type of deal for Billy Napier, but not a game you want to lose in your first year. You don't want to lose this game if you can help it. Florida State's been down since about 2015. We'll see how much, if at all, better they are this year than what we've seen the last few years out of them. Big game every single year, rivalry game, bragging rights on the line. This is a big game for recruiting within the state of Florida as well. Florida's got to travel and play them in Tallahassee at Florida State. Always a really good game at the end of the year during rivalry week when we get a lot of these in-state matchups and rivalry games played every single year the last week of the regular season, this year on November 25th. There it is. That is Florida's schedule for 2022. Taking a look at the NonCon schedule, Utah, South Florida, Eastern Washington, and Florida State. This is a pretty good non-con schedule. The Eastern Washington game is kind of a throwaway, but a lot of teams schedule a throwaway game, so you can't knock Florida for that. Scheduling Utah, they're no cupcake. I mean, that's going to be a difficult game for Florida to win. No question about it. That's going to be a tough one. And then, of course, they end, like they do every year, at Florida State. So they've got 2 Power 5 non-con opponents. So they play 8 SEC games, and then they play 2 Non-con Power 5. So 10 Power 5 opponents, one Group of 5 opponent in South Florida who, look, let's be honest, there have been years when South Florida has been pretty good. It's not Florida's fault that they happen to be bad right now when Florida is playing them. So, again, I don't knock Florida for scheduling that game either. And even the Eastern Washington game, you know, if every team had a schedule like this, 2 Power 5 non-cons, a Group of 5, and 1 throwaway, I would be happy with that. I think this is I like this schedule for Florida. Florida fans might not like it. Toughest games at Tennessee, right? Home against Utah, at Tennessee, home against LSU, Jacksonville against Georgia, at Texas A&M, at Florida State. This is a tough schedule. Let me know down in the comments below. What do y'all think? Give me a range for Florida. What do you think the worst possible record they might have is? What do you think the best possible record they might have is? And is there anybody that thinks Florida has a chance to win the SEC East or the SEC in 2022? Let me know. But until then, though, have a good morning.